Hello, everyone. This is FIDE Master Viktor Neustroev, and thank you for attending our webinar 45 that is called The Technique of Playing Rook and Games. So today we're going to cover some basics that you may face uh, when you play a Rook and game. And of course, I'm going to talk about drawing tendencies because if you want to make a draw without a pawn or in a bad position, you may have it only in a Rook and game. Okay, please let me know if the sound is okay. You can hear and you can actually see my screen. So on the screen, I'm showing my YouTube channel. So if you want to subscribe, please do it. This is the link. So the recording of this webinar will be here. I also have a playlist that is called webinars here on my YouTube channel. There is a list of the webinars I conducted. You can watch all of them. I think some of them are really interesting and helpful. Okay. Okay, fine. So if you're attending the webinar for the first time, please let me know where did you find the announcement of this webinar? Also, I want you to send me a friend request on chess.com. So this is my chess.com profile. So here you have the option to add me to your friend list, send a friend request or something like that, and then you can follow me there. If so, you won't miss any announcements about the events that I conduct, about the tournaments, simuls, and other webinars. Sometimes I also publish some educational materials that are helpful. So, for example, people really liked my video about how to improve the visualization of a certain position. So, because it not only helps to improve the visualization, but also improves your calculation skills. Okay, fine. So what we are going to start with. So first I decided to show a few positions and I want you to find the solution here. Actually, of course, it's white to move here. And I want you to find the best move for white. And after this best move, how do you evaluate the position? So king g2, what do you mean, Anirudh? So the king can go to g2. Okay, king g1. Okay, yeah, I agree with you. It's king g1. So by playing king g1, I think black can't really do anything. So king g1, what? If this pawn moves to g2, just rook a3 with a check, king g4, so the king is cut off. How to play? Just any move, including king h2 actually, but I would play rook c3 just to keep the king cut off because black can't succeed. If he does a check, I would just take on g2, and that's it. What else? So here king g4, maybe even this move or rook e8 move works as well, because then we can start checking from behind. Okay, what else? If not g2 but rook g2 check, where would you go with your king now? King h1. Right, king h1, and so there is nothing he can do. G2 even loses because of rook a3, king goes here, king h2. Okay, so there was a good remark by Marcel that after king g1, g2, rook checks, then king g4, there is a perfect move that makes a draw immediately. It's just rook g3. Rook g3, and if he takes, this is a stalemate. If not, then we capture the g2 pawn, and that's it. So let's go back. So what should you remember? That in case of A, B, G, and H, pawns, the side who has extra pawn can succeed actually if you are able to locate your king in front of the pawn and block it. For example, here, if for example your king is so far, then king h2, and then he promotes, of course. But if you block the king by putting it on the same file as the pawn is, even if you are cut off on the second rank, it's gonna be a draw. Just don't blunder a mating threat. However, if there are c3, d3, e3, or f3 pawns, then black can win. In some cases. In some cases, you can make a draw, and I'm going to explain it now. Okay, so let's close it. Now, the second example. This position. So here it's actually black to move, and this is the f pawn. So if black plays properly, the pawn can be promoted. What do you think black should do here? What's the winning plan? Rook f2? How does rook f2 helps? So I think rook f2, if this move is played, then what can white play? What do you think? I think rook a3, but I like rook a8 with the idea to put checks from behind. I think that's the best idea. Rook a8, then rook g8. So rook f2 is not a good move, as well as rook h2, because rook h2 is faced with something like rook e8, and then white starts checking from behind. But as Vitaly mentioned here, rook g2 check first. Now he has two options, either to go here or here. Let's first analyze king h1. How would you continue? Okay, right. So you play rook h2, he goes here, then f2, after he goes here, then rook h1, we gain a rook, and then the game. Fine. Let's go back. What if in this position he goes to f1? How to continue now? Okay, so it's not f2, because if so, then this check can be delivered. King has to move to h2. And then I think something like rook f3 works. The pawn is lost, because rook g1 is faced with king f2. Not f2, but a rook h2 with the same idea to deliver a mate with rook h1, and if king goes to e1, it's just a rook loss. So king goes back, then f2 is just the same position. Okay, this is the technique that allows black to win in this position. However, what do you think if it's white's turn to move here? For example, I lose a tempo with this move. What do you think if it's white's turn to move? What can white do? Can white save the position? Checks from behind? But how? Rook h3, what do you mean? Rook a3? No, rook a3 doesn't work. Rook e8? Okay, rook e8 is not a good idea, because if rook e8 is played, then rook c1 mate. Rook d1 could make sense, but rook d1 is the same thing with rook g2, rook h2, and f2. Actually, in this position, it doesn't make sense whose turn it is. And black wins in both cases, in all the cases here. Because he already advanced the king and pawn to the third rank while the rook is located here. So the rook can't move and check from behind. It just doesn't have enough tempers. Okay, so let's close it. Now please look at this position. It's white to move, and there are no mating threats while the while the pawn and this king are located on the fourth rank. What do you think? Can white make a draw in this position? If yes, then how? This is what is known as Philidor position. The king is located in front of the pawn, and this is FEDC pawn. So the pawn is the F pawn now. It can be promoted if no, it okay. So there is a risk that this pawn can be promoted. The task for white is to find the draw in this position. So, and you guys suggest rook a3 here. Okay, rook a3. What do you think black gonna do after rook a3? Sorry, this is the position again. Okay, so either f3 or rook b1. Let's discuss. So if rook b1 is played, just king f2. And there is nothing better but to give a check back on b2 and repeat the position, because if something like that, we can check from the fourth rank and then just capture the pawn and claim a draw. If f3 in this position, then what do you think white can do to be able to make a draw? King g1? William, what do you expect from black after white plays king g1? No, not f2. Okay, if king g1 is played, which is a bad move in this position, then just king g3. And then black promotes with, black is threatening to give a checkmate with rook b1, so rook has to go back. But then rook g2, here it doesn't really matter king h1 or king f1. In both cases, rook h2, then f2, and rook h1. Or rook h1, and black is winning. That's why the only way to make a draw in this position is not to play king at g1. King should be located in front of the pawn. But now, when the pawn came to the third rank first, while the king is still there are no mating threats. That's why we don't need to get our rook back, but we can use our rook to deliver checks from behind. Rook e8. That's the strongest move. What can he do? King here, check. If he goes here, we can still keep checking him. If he comes closer to the rook, we can still check him and then move our rook back to the file, to the f file, to attack the pawn. And if he goes somehow back to e4 to protect it, we just keep checking him. In this position, looks like he doesn't have anything but to sacrifice the f pawn and then fix a draw. Okay, if, for example, in this position, it's black's turn to move, let me lose a tempo. For example, I play rook c1. It doesn't really matter where this rook is located, on a1, c1, d1, e1. But in this position, it's now black to move, and black can win. How? f3? Or king g3? Okay, so king g3. Why not f3? Because if he does f3, we can put our rook to the back rank, and there are no mating threats. So we have enough time to deliver checks from behind. That's why king d3 would be the best move, because if now rook comes to c8, he can just do this, king goes e2, then f3, king e3, rook checks, king d2, and f2. And then the pawn will be promoted. For example, check on g8, sorry. So rook checks on g8, king goes to h4. King goes h4, rook checks here, king goes here, and then just the king comes closer. So, and the pawn can be promoted anyway. If, for example, here rook f8, then just f1, and white has to sacrifice his rook for a queen, and then the game is over. Let's go back. So in this position, it matters whose turn it is. If it's black to move, then black starts with the king first to the third rank, because after check on f3, black is able to block it with the f pawn and create a mating threat with a back rank mate, rook b1. So that there is no time to for white to put the rook to the back rank, to the 8th rank, to check from behind. But if it's white's turn to move in this position, white first plays rook a3 to prevent king g3 move. The only way to try at least to progress is to play f3 for black in this position, but after this move, we have enough time to play rook e8 because there are no mating threats. The king is still on the 4th rank, and this is how we make a draw. Okay, so this is Philidor position, and here the turn to move matters. If it's white to move, white is able to make a draw. If it's black to move, then black wins by pushing the king forward. So here one squares down to g3. Okay, I hope you understand it. Okay, one more position for you. Uh, okay, this is the position. In this position, it doesn't really matter whose turn it is. Oh, but it's white to move here. What can you say? Can white win this position? And if yes, then how? Okay, if we locate the king on e8 here, this position is known as Lucina position, named by a Spanish chess player who first created, and he demonstrated the way for white to win. And I want you to find how white can win here. So what can you suggest in this position? Rook d4. Okay, guys, not only suggest the moves, but also explains the ideas, please. Okay, wait a sec. Okay, so again, the position. So when you suggest a move, what is the idea behind this move? So rook f2, rook e2. So you want to cut the king off, rook e2, then rook e4 to block the own king. Okay, so the main concept here is just to escape with the king and then promote. However, every time we escape, we get the checks from behind. And our task is to block these checks. So first we play this move. What this move does? This move actually cuts the enemy king off the pawn. So because if he does this move, then what move can allow us to win? Yes, it's king f8. King f8, and then we just play this move. Here he can't really do anything. Let's say he plays this move. G8 equals queen, and after he checks, we just block with our rook. Everything is perfect, and white wins. So that's why after this check, he has either to play d6 or d7 or d8 actually. Let's play d6. How to continue? King f7, king g7, rook g4. Any other suggestions? So because I don't like king f7, I think in such a case, rook f1 is played. I'll show you. King f7, rook f1. King g6, rook here. King f6, check. King g5, another check. And again, check. So no, it's not king f7. Okay, another move, rook g2, doesn't really make much sense. He just goes back to e7. Okay, rook e4 first. This is what was suggested by William. William, what's the idea of this move? Yeah, so this is what is known as building a bridge. So for example, how does he play in this position? Let's say king. Okay, let's say rook h2. Then we play this move. He checks. We go here. He checks again to stop the pawn from promotion. We do this move. He checks. King g5. And after this move, we just block and are able to successfully promote the pawn. This is how we block the check. This is what is called building a bridge. The idea is to play this and then this move to block. Or what else can he do? Let's say rook e4. He can play king d5. How would you play in this position? Yes, rook g4 immediately, because now this rook can support our pawn. For example, he goes back to e6. We just play king f8 move, and on the next move promote. If he tries to do something like that, of course we can promote with a check immediately. But if, for example, it's a different position, it's the other pawn, we can just deliver a check first and then promote. So that rook e8 is not a checkmate. And white is winning. What else can be played here? Maybe if we go back, so check, let's say he goes to d7, then we play this move. He may play maybe this move. What would you do? Okay, so still rook g4. Then we are trying to go either to h7 or to f7. For example, here king goes here, king g6, and then we promote on g8. There is nothing that he can stop. Okay, so this is what is called Lucena position, and this is what we should try to achieve when we play with extra pawn in a rook game. Then just build a bridge and win it. However, remember that you can't promote if it's the edge pawn. Then you don't have this option, and your opponent can find a way how to block it. For example, once I played it with the h pawn and was unable to succeed. That was a draw. Okay, fine. Let's close it. I hope everything is clear. Okay, please look at this position. White has extra pawn, and what is more important, this rook is located. Oh, so this rook is located uh, behind the pawn, and this is actually one of the main ideas that you should stick when you play rook in game. So doesn't really matter if it's your pawn or if it's the enemy pawn. You should locate your rook behind that passed pawn. So here I like the position of white rook on a4. Black rook is quite passive. If it moves, then we can advance the pawn forward. So black can try to get the king to the queen side and capture this pawn with the help of this king, but I think white wins in such a case because the pawn in game will be winning while the enemy king is located too far from the king side. What do you think white should do in this position to win it? Actually, maybe some of you know this position. It's a position taken from the last game between Alexander Alekhine and Jose Rul Capablanca that they played in 1927 uh, in their World Championship match. So, what white should do to succeed? You can suggest concrete moves, but actually, I am asking you to suggest a plan. So, what should we do? Okay, for those who joined this webinar recently, we are talking about Rook and games, and here I'm going to show the example. This is a fragment from the game between Alexander Alekhine and Jose Rul Capablanca. Here, White has extra pawn, and your task is to find a plan that allows White to succeed. Okay, so William suggests G4, a pawn move. G4. What's the idea? So let's say G4, king goes to E5, for example. Okay, so to attack two squares? No, I don't think that makes sense. Okay, so what are typical plans for white in this position? Of course, the best thing that white can achieve, or at least can try to achieve, is to move the king to the queen side to support the pawn, and then this pawn can be promoted together with the king. So king b5, rook moves a6, then king b6, a7, king b7, and a8. So bring the king to the center. If you don't know what to do, then yes, bring the king to the center. However, in this position, bring the king to the queen side. And if this king goes to the queen side too, you should go to the other side, like that. I'll show you. King f3, king f5, king e3, h5, king b3, king d5, king c3, king c5, rook a2, he goes to b5, king b3. What can be played in this position? Of course, he can capture on e5. If so, rook takes rook, king takes, then king goes here, king b6, king d5, king c7, king e5, king d7, king f6, king e8. And in this position, we can just play f4. He goes to f8, and then we play f5. After g takes f5, we take this, and then this pawn, and then just win this pawn in game because of extra pawn. If he doesn't take, then we take ourselves, and then the h5 pawn also dies. So this is what I explained you. This is what I wanted you to know. So if he tries to take the pawn, what automatically leads to a rook trade. White king is closer to the king side and is able to capture the enemy pawns. That's why such a pawn in game would be a winning in game. However, black doesn't take, he plays king c5 and repeats the position. King c3, king b5. So king b3 would lead to a draw. That's why here white applies the second part of the plan. He plays king d4 with the idea to get to the king side and attack these pawns. What can black do in this position? Black can, of course, try to prevent white king's activity. So, for example, if king b4, just rook a1. And if he goes to b3, king c5. And if we continue, rook a4, king b3, and here just king b5 is enough, then a6 and so on. For example, rook a8, a6, rook b8, king a5. This is the winning position. We play a7. No, first we of course move the rook somewhere, then play a7 and help to promote the pawn with our king. No, rook a5 doesn't work, but he plays rook d6 check. King a5, rook e6, king a4, and the idea of this rook maneuver was to block this pawn with the king. Now king a6. So this is how black tries to prevent this pawn being captured. So the rook is able to protect the f7 pawn. If, for example, not king a6 but f6 to prevent king g5 activity, what looks natural, then what do you think? Which move can allow us to succeed? No, now white king can't go to the queen side, to the king side, sorry, to attack the pawns. So what white should do to be able to succeed in this? G4, G5, you mean? No, I don't think. If G4 is played, I believe he can just play. He can just take, or maybe he can play. Yeah, H takes G4 looks like the best idea, I think. Black moves G5, but I don't think G5 works. It's just pawn loss. No, not G5. It doesn't make sense. But A6, right? A6 works. So how to stop? Looks like he has to take. So he can either play this move or play rook a6. If rook a6, I think it's clear. In this position, we just play g4. Oh, actually, wait a sec. King e4 is enough. Yeah, just we just capture the pawns like that. A6, he can play rook e8. If so, we play a7. Rook comes here. And then our task is to take these pawns, so f3, g4, and then we create a distant pass pawn with h5 in case if he takes on g4. I'll show you so how to play here. King b6 maybe. Then I think we actually win in a different way. But okay, let's say not b6, but c6. Maybe it's better. If so, g4, h takes g4, f takes g4, king moves to d5 maybe, and then h5. So he takes, and then the king can't stop it. So king e6, h6, king f7, king f5. So king g8. If so, we just play this move, and then our task is to play rook b8, rook b2, rook b8, and the game is over. If, for example, here he doesn't take, but plays king d6, then we take, he takes, and then we just come and take the pawn with this move, and then promote our h pawn. Okay, so William suggests g5 here. I don't understand. g5, h takes g5, f takes g5, king takes g5. And what then? This pawn dies. So he has to block. It's an absolutely losing position for black. Okay, fine. So he doesn't play f6, but he blocks this pawn with his king. Now f7 is the object of the attack. King g5. Rook e5 check, king h6, and rook f5. So he relocated the rook to be able to protect the pawn. How would you play in this position? King g7 or what? How to succeed? What comes to your mind? f4 to protect the f pawn, but I don't think this pawn requires any protection. F4 of course makes sense. However, it's not. We don't care about this pawn. It's not hanging, so we can play either f4 or king g7. But f4 is played to restrict his rook activity. So what can he play? Well, rook f6 is just a tempo loss. Then king g7 with a tempo. He plays rook c5 with the idea to attack our weakness. We play this move. Rook goes to c7. And if, for example, rook f5, we can play king here. And then play rook e3, rook e5 to trade the rooks off. And then because we are close to these three pawns, we just take them with our king. The game is over. So if, for example, in this position, we remove two rooks and a5 pawn from the board, white will be definitely better, or definitely winning. So rook c7 with the idea to, I don't know what, but king g7 was played. Rook d7. So he can't move this pawn with a check because he loses the other one on g6. And looks like now white is stuck with his plans. So what can you suggest to white? What do you think white can do in this position? f5, what's the idea of f5 move? So by playing f5, we attack, and yes, so f5. This is the winning plan. What do we want? So of course we want to capture here on g6 immediately. For example, if he plays this move, then how do we win? What do you think? f6, and what then? f6, rook d7. King f8, king f8, rook c7. Rook e3. Yes, it's rook e3 move with the idea to play rook e7. For example, for example, king a5, rook e7, rook here. Then king f7, rook g3, check on e5, king b6, and after king e7, we just promote. There is nothing he can do. If he tries to check from behind, it won't work. Rook e8, the game is over. So it's checking from the side. If he tries to attack from behind, we just promote, and he has to sacrifice the rook. So that's why here he takes. Here, king f6 makes sense, but king h6 is better, because we'd better take this pawn to create a distant passed pawn. f4, g takes f4, rook d5. King g7, this pawn is still hanging. If he does f5 move, then king g6 and the h5 pawn dies. But rook f5. How would you play in this position for white? Yeah, rook a4, we don't really need to care about it. So if king b5 here, no, this is what was played in the game actually. We just play rook e4. And the idea of this move that we are going to trade on e5. So king a5, for example, rook a5 check, he takes. We take with the pawn, and then this king is so far, so we just promote the e pawn, and that's it. So he plays king a6. What should we do? What do you think? Should we play rook e7 and capture the f pawn or not? No, of course no, because in such a case we can lose 2 pawns. So how to play? Rook a4 back or what? Rook a5, if we play rook a5, he takes on f4. So for example, rook a5, he takes on f4. We take the h pawn. He plays f5. I'm not sure that we are winning because this a5 pawn dies. Of course, this rook is the king is closer to the h pawn, but I'm not sure that white is winning. So there is a better option than playing rook e5 right now. Yeah, we can play either king g8, king f8, or king h6. If, for example, here we play king g8, rook f6, king f8. And if now he takes on a5, we can play king e7. And he either loses the f pawn or has to go to f5. And after that, we trade and promote the e pawn. If he doesn't take, for example, he plays this move, then king e7 and he's in a Zugzwang. Maybe it doesn't really matter, maybe this move, but he's in a Zugzwang anyway. He has to capture and then we give rook e5 check. If he goes, for example, to b7, we can play rook e7, he takes and take here, because now all our pawns are promoted. So, for example, this move, check, he goes here, then king g6, we play f5, then take on h5 and promote the f pawn. Oh, not going to the king queen side, of course, here, but here he is in a Zugzwang. You see, he has no moves. He either goes to the seventh rank, if so, we deliver check on e7, or takes here. If so, we play king g7 and rook e5, offering a rook straight. That was the best idea. However, king h6 was played instead. So in the game it was rook a5, but let's say he goes to a7 with the king, or b7, then we play rook a5. He captures on f4, we play king g5, then take on h5, f5, and here with two passed pawns we are winning. So then we just take this pawn. Oh, he tries this move, then king f2, and the game is over because we also take this pawn. So what can happen? So probably he does this move. We capture with the king. Everything is protected, so two extra pawns, and that's why white wins. Let's go back. King a6. We played king h6, then rook takes a5. This is what was played. Rook e5, rook a1, king h5. So do you see, the main problem is that the king is so far. If the king is here, then I would say it's a draw. Rook g5, rook h1, rook f5. So we take the second pawn, and the enemy king is so far from the king side. So there is no hope for black. And after king c6, rook e7, it's even cut off. And this is where black resigned. And this victory allowed Alexander Alekhine to succeed in this world championship and became the next world champion. Okay, so let's go back to the very beginning and I'll quickly repeat the idea. So first, we are going to the king side to try to support the pawn with our king. If he doesn't allow to do us, then we should find a way to move our king to the other side and take his pawns. Because every time when he could capture our pawn and trade the rooks off, he would pass the game into absolutely losing pawn in game because his king will be so far from the king side. Okay, fine. And of course, the other thing that I want you to remember is that Rook games are full of drawing tendencies. For example, well, let's go back again. So let me open this position. So here, I just want you to know that if we change the rook's location, for example, if black rook would be somewhere on a2 and this rook was located ahead of the pawn, well, let's say this is black rook and this is white rook. So then it's gonna be a draw because if white king tries to go to the king side to support the pawn, at least black can capture one of the pawns and then create a distant passed pawn. No, black can create a distant passed pawn on the king side and even sacrifice his rook for the pawn. So let's say the king is somewhere here. Black sacrifices his rook for a pawn, but at the same time creates a distant passed pawn on the g file, for example. And finally, white would be able to sacrifice his rook for that distant passed pawn, and that will be a draw. This is a typical idea when um, black can make a draw even without a pawn. The task is just to locate the rook behind the pass pawn and get some activity with the pieces and pawns to create a distant pass pawn on the other side. Fine. So the last example that we are going to observe is from the game between Gary Kasparov and Nigel Short. This is the game actually also from a world championship match. Um, However, this world championship match wasn't conducted by FIDE. It was a professional chess players association that was created by Gary Kasparov. And there he played with the strongest second player, according to the version of PCA. That was Nigel Short, because the game was in 1993. So, what do you think? White has two extra pawns. What is the winning idea for white here? What comes to your mind? So, should we play rook a3? What's the idea of rook a3 move? What do you think? Or e4? Yeah, of course, guys, the move that you suggested makes sense. Yes, Lucina position. Yes, maybe you should build it, but here you have two pawns, so it's not required actually. So, okay, so you guys suggested several moves. I think Rook a3 is not really doing much, but anyway, the move that deserves attention. What about e4? We are going to discuss e4 a little bit later. What else can you suggest? But William, if you play e4, he can go to d4. Isn't it better for black? Mm-hmm. Okay, so a4, so then it's impossible for black king and white king to go further. Okay, guys, actually, you are not correct with e4 move, and actually, this is what Garry Kasparov played, and this move loses a victory. How is it possible? I'll show you. Well, in this game, of course, it was played king e6. No, no, I can't say of course, but yes, it was played king e6, and for some reason, Nigel Short also didn't notice the way how to force a draw here. Instead, he could play rook c5. This is a tricky move. Looks like we allow the a pawn to be promoted, but it's so far. Then rook checks, king g4, king takes e4, and after a6, rook is able to go back, and then black king is closer. King d4, king f5, king c4, king e6, king d4, rook has to move, king c5, king d7, king d6. So then we are about to take this pawn on the next move. For example, rook b1 check, king takes here is a mistake because of king c7. But for example, here we can just play king a6 and take on a7 with our rook with a check. If he does king c6, then king takes here, and it's not a checkmate. King here, king a6. Oh, wait, no. Wait. If king goes to c6, then check first, king moves, and then rook goes back. That's the best way, I think, to force a draw. Yeah, so here, because of rook c3, rook c5, rook c3 idea, black is able to make a draw. Okay, rook c5, sorry. E4, rook c5, what else can be played? a5, for example. Oh, this is what we analyzed. Rook a3, to stop rook c3 coming. If so, then rook c4, double attacking two pawns simultaneously. So this is a draw because rook a4, and this is even a better version of Philidor position because here the king is not cut off and the pawn is so far. This is a draw, definitely. If a5 in this position, rook takes e4, and here rook e3 won't work. We just trade, and this king, black king, is in the square of a pawn. So if a6 in this position, then rook f4, king e3, rook f8, and rook is able to block. Then the king comes closer to the pawn, and then a7 pawn dies. So this is how black could make a draw. I don't know why Nigel Short didn't notice. Maybe he was low on time. Here the winning move is king e2, king e4, rook a3. Black is in a zugzwang. He either moves the king and allows us to play king d3 and d4, or plays with his pawn and allows us to play a5. King d5, king d3, king c5, e4, king goes here, then king d4, king d6, king c4, and this is a winning position. We help to promote this pawn with our king. Rook checks from d3, for example. If king e5, then king b4, rook a8, then a5. And if he takes here, we just play king c5, and our king is quite close to the queen square and helps to promote the a pawn. So e4 was played, and Nigel replied with king e6, king e3, king d6, king d4. So again, he is in a zugzwang. He has either to play c6 or d7. If c6, king c4, and it's almost the same position. But he played king d7 because he wanted to force white to lose their position. King b4, rook e5, rook c1 check. King b6 and rook c4. Everything is protected, and this is where black resigned. Why did he resign? What do you think? What is our plan here? So what other move can he play? Let's say he plays maybe rook h5. What can we do to be able to succeed here? Everything is done. Our task is just to find the winning plan. Rook d4, rook d5. Well, if we play rook d4, then rook e5, and rook d5 cannot be played. He just takes on e4. So I don't think. I still believe that rook d4 doesn't lose the advantage, but it's not a winning move. a5, rook a5. Wait, no, you can't play like that. a5, rook takes a5. If you then suggest rook c6, king c6, king takes a5, king d6, it's a draw because black is able to locate his king in front of the pawn. No, it's not a5. Rook c1 and rook e1, but he blocks with the e pawn with rook e5 move. Okay, just think about what do we need to promote the e pawn, and then you'll of course find the solution. Rook c1 and rook a1, rook a5. Maybe rook a5 because the e4 pawn will be a weakness too. Guys, everything is already done. What's the best way to promote a passed pawn? And which passed pawn to promote? What's the idea of rook c8? To attack from behind? Does it make sense? Let's say rook c8, rook e5. No, it doesn't work. Rook b8, king a7. Rook b5, rook takes e4. Okay, so I'll show you. I'll show you. So rook e5 here, how to save the pawn. This check won't work. King a7 and everything is hanging. So this move, then of course black is able to make a draw here because he locates the king in front. And I told you that the a and h, so the edge pawns cannot be promoted if the king stands in front of the pawn. So not rook c8. Rook d4, king c4, and how does it help? In such a case, I believe black can relocate the rook to the a5 and then threaten this pawn. Ah, no, in case of rook c8, then rook e5, not a5. Rook a5 will be a blunder, of course. Okay, so let me show you a winning plan, because... Okay, yes. So actually, here your task is just to notice that the enemy king is already cut off. That's why the only thing we need is just to promote our e4 pawn with the help of our king. So this check is useless. We do this. So he tries to do this, then e6. He can even try to check us from behind. but it won't help him. So let's say rook comes to f1. We play this move. He checks again. We play this move. I don't know. He attacks. We play this move. He tries this. Maybe over rook d1, king d7, check, here, check, here, check, here. And after this check, we just build a bridge. This is how we win the game. So you see? So cut the enemy king off and promote one of the pawns. Anyone. Here you have two. Yeah, fourth rank or fifth rank if possible. Fourth rank is enough to cover, but not the third rank. So you should locate the rook on the fourth rank. So guys, I see you experience real problems with rook in games actually, and if you want to learn more about rook in games, I would recommend you to pass my course. You can find it here. So on my website. So this is, okay, I'll show you here. So this is the curriculum. So what we are going to talk about in the course, it's a Philidor position, Lucina position, and then some basic principles that you should follow. So how to use open file, how to occupy the seventh rank, and how to use it. So rook activity, and how to deal with passed pawns. And for those who attended this webinar, the price is just 50% off, so it costs only $17. Okay, if you want, there is the link, and this sale will end on Friday. So you have at least 5 days to enroll into this course if you want. Or you can also practice Rook and games and learn everything with your by mistakes. Okay, fine. So if you have any questions, don't hesitate to ask them. You can also suggest the topics for our future webinars. Don't forget to subscribe to my YouTube channel, of course, because there will be I'm going to release a few new videos that I think can attract you. And I think you will not only like them, but can find something very useful and helpful there. If there are any questions, don't hesitate to ask. If there are no, then let's finish for today. The next webinar will be on Sunday, and I'm still working on a topic for the next webinar. If you have any ideas to suggest, it's fine. Just tell me what you think. You can also email me at tricksofchess at gmail.com. This is my email. Okay, fine. Thank you. Thank you for attending this webinar. Hope to see you next Sunday.